Good morning. I'd like to take a few minutes to talk about our course for week number 2 and also to review week 1. For starters, I wanted to go through the first quiz. You did have 2 attempts at this quiz, so I would recommend that you review materials before you take the weekly quiz, the lectures and screencasts, maybe cross-reference them against the textbook reading, maybe make an attempt at the quiz first time through. After you've done that, look at the questions that you've missed and then go back through the materials and take the quiz a second time. And you are scored with the highest of your 2 attempts on the quiz. So question number 1, basic definition of geography. It was in the lecture in the textbook as well. Of course, this is a geography class, so we all want to be tuned into what is unique about this study of geography, and it has been called the spatial science. So you see the term spatial in there in reference to geographic space. And then the 2 branches of human and physical geography, here described in terms of human and physical landscapes. Okay, so there was a couple of lecture slides, and again discussed at some length in the first chapter the concept of climate and the idea that climate changes as one moves north or south from the equator. And so as we go through, an example was given for Africa, where the measure of latitude. Longitude is an east-west measure, latitude is a north-south measure. And so because the distance from the equator is measured in terms of latitude, that is considered to be the most important control on the climate, which can be simply defined as the long-range patterns of temperature and climate for, temperature and rainfall for a particular area. Formal regions or uniform regions are indeed defined by internal homogeneity. You can think of the Central Valley, for example, of California, that has uniform flat terrain, agricultural practices, for example. The next question here, the most common system of geographic coordinates uses latitude to measure distance from the equator. We just talked about that a moment ago as a climate control, and also longitude to measure distance from the prime meridian. And again, longitude is not a climate control, but is important for giving us the east-west coordinate location. And you can see I've given you a couple of an example of a latitude and longitude geographic coordinate. States in the world are commonly classified according to their levels of income, education, health, technology, and so forth. This is the concept of development, covered extensively in the first chapter of the book as well as the lecture. Plate tectonics relates to the concepts that earthquakes and volcanoes are generally found along moving boundaries of interlocking plates. Question number 7, regions can be defined by different conditions. So urban areas connected by roads and rail lines are examples of functional regions, also sometimes called networked regions, in contrast to the formal region we talked about a moment ago. A politically organized territory administered by a sovereign government is the definition of a state. And this is perhaps a little bit confusing to Americans because we think of states as the internal divisions, but actually in this case, the United States would be classified as a sovereign state. Okay, urbanization, the number of people or the percentage of people living in cities. This is a phenomena that is increasing worldwide. It's increasing in developed high-income countries and in underdeveloped low-income countries as well. Physical geography and human geography are the 2 branches of the discipline we spoke about earlier. Human migration. So again, this is one of the characteristics of the world today. And so if we review our 5 themes of geography, location, that's perhaps the most defining one, although human environment interactions is another one that really defines geography. region, which is the guiding principle of our course, the concept of place, that each place is unique, and finally movement. And so human migration would be an example of movement. And then finally, we had a review of this particular locale as a way to sort of introduce our course. And this was the country of Yemen. Okay, so with that, let me jump back to the course for this week. You can see that there are 3 things listed to do. You have review questions for a video, which I think you'll find interesting, on the subject of migration into Europe. That's due on February the 13th, which is Thursday. You have a review quiz similar to this one that you had last week, where you'll have 2 attempts related to the lectures and textbook readings. And then finally, your first map quiz. And in your first map quiz, you'll want to be sure to check the materials that are posted under the map. Let me pull this up for you. So under the map quiz materials, this first link is key. So you're going to want to check out the list of competencies for Europe and Russia. Those are the place names, cities, countries, rivers, mountain ranges that you will be responsible for, and then examples of the types of maps that these questions will be based on. So you will have a series of 20 multiple choice questions that will mark locations on a map and give you place names that you need to try to match to those places. Okay, so once again, we are in the modules. So for this week's module, you'll see lecture content. You see I have a 30-minute screencast introducing Europe. We've got a lecture, and in this case, the lecture is written in more of a narrative fashion. And I give you some objectives. Again, these will complement and have some degree of overlap with the screencast. And then I again list the sort of outline of study notes. Okay, so some of the things that are described, once again, just multiple points of access to this content, which is quite in depth. And so repetition is going to be important, right? To be able to see these in a few different contexts. And finally, I have a list of terms and concepts. Again, back referencing each of these previous items. Again, here's the graded activities. And then I give you a number of supporting links, including some fun videos that you can check out on your own. So in introducing Europe to you, and again, you have a separate screencast on this, but there was a news story that I wanted to share that I thought was quite curious that this was today's news. And the title of the article from a publication called The Atlantic is that Ireland's nationalist movement, the country's surprising election results are a rejection of the status quo and point to rising nationalism. Nationalism, which could be defined as the focus on one's nation, sometimes corresponds to the boundaries of the sovereign state, but oftentimes it does not, and it represents a view of valuing one's community, but oftentimes excluding, and there's sometimes a fear of the other or a resentment towards outsiders that is characteristic of this idea of nationalism. There's been a global rise in nationalism worldwide with election wins in Brazil, the Philippines, Hungary, the UK, and the United States in the last 5 years or so. This has been a blow to democracies as nationalist and populist leaders often curtail freedoms and turn to a more leader-centered autocratic form of government. This is widely attributed to the rise of and here I'm quoting from the article, the rise of anti-establishment forces, including high rents, failing social services, and rampant inequality. I'm going to repeat those three because they really are fundamental to understanding why we have seen this shift away from democracies as we have known them over the last few decades. So the quote again, the rise of anti-establishment forces, including high rents, failing social services, and rampant inequality. So the election this last weekend in the Republic of Ireland is surprising because democracy and free market economics were seen as successful in Ireland. It's worth noting at the moment that Ireland, in this case, we're talking about the sovereign state of the Republic of Ireland, which divides the island of Ireland. There's a northern section, Northern Ireland, which is actually part of the United Kingdom, again, in the lecture this week. So this recent election was somewhat surprising, and yet the authors of the article go on to say that over the weekend, Irish voters handed an unprecedented victory to Sinn Féin, a nationalist party that is perhaps best known for being the political arm of the Irish Republican Army, or the IRA, during the decades of sectarian conflict in Northern Ireland known as the Troubles. So the IRA, the reference to the Troubles was that during several decades, there was a conflict in which the IRA, the Irish Republican Army, which was an underground organization associated with the political party that won elections, actually carried out a campaign of bombings and other actions aimed at pushing the United Kingdom out of Northern Ireland. In other words, to reunite the island of Ireland under the single flag of the Republic of Ireland. Now, you might ask yourself, what's going on here that's contributing to this? Well, one of the things that is often pointed to is that England has declared that they are leaving the European Union, excuse me, what is known as Brexit, the British exit, and it is well on its way to taking place. The European Union is considered a supranationalist organization in that they are looking to reduce barriers and increase cooperation between the states, and there are about 20 some odd countries in Europe that are signed on. So with Britain leaving, this was a blow to this idea of cooperation between countries. So how does this affect Northern Ireland, or how does this affect Ireland? Well, under the European Union, people could freely move between the Republic of Ireland and the neighboring country of the United Kingdom in Northern Ireland. So you could cross easily from the Republic of Ireland to Northern Ireland, which people wanted to do because they had family members and so forth. With Brexit, now all of a sudden you have tighter border controls, less opportunity for people to work across the border, and this is obviously a concern. And so now what we see is a rise of the sentiments of trying to once again reunite Ireland under a single flag. There is rising resentment against the United Kingdom, not just in Ireland and within Northern Ireland, but also Scotland, which narrowly voted down independence. And it looks like there is a move again towards Scottish independence, which would break Scotland away from the United Kingdom. Again, the UK being a sovereign state, which includes England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. And even in Wales, there's beginning to be talk about nationalism and a desire to split away from the United Kingdom. All of these representing devolutionary forces. You think of evolution as progressing. Devolving means to move backwards. So these are countries that are looking to devolve or split away from their host countries. And again, this is something that is representative of processes that are taking place across Europe. And so as you look through the lectures and listen to the other screencast, keep this in mind. So with that little introduction, we'll look forward to seeing you online. Have a nice Monday.